and welcome to this edition of the Urban Debate. We've got 4 big stories lined up for you for the next 1 hour. Let's begin with the latest from Kashmir. It's day 9 since the clampdown in Jammu and Kashmir began, and as Twitter and social media continues to be flooded with fake news, propaganda and false narratives, on Mirror Now, we have decided to not speculate, to not bring you or offer you any opinions, to not even debate what's going on in Kashmir right now, because the information and confirmed news is so sparse. On Mirror Now, we have decided to bring you only the facts as we know from the valley. And this is what it looks like. Prohibitory orders continue in Srinagar and parts of the valley. In fact, we've not been able to get in touch with our correspondent who is in Srinagar for over 24 hours now. For the 9th day in a row, internet connection, mobile phones and landline services are down. Schools and colleges and offices remain shut. However, Independence Day celebrations are on in full swing in Srinagar and other parts. In fact, there were dress rehearsals that were held today at the Kashmir Stadium. Of course, the situation is much better in Jammu and the nearby areas where the restrictions have now been relaxed and things are getting back to normal. But that's Jammu. In Kashmir, there's not been much of a change. To get you up to speed about all the facts from the valley, let's go across to Tanima. Tanima, from what we've heard from the government, from the official administration, the police, and whatever little bit of correspondence we've had with our reporter there, you've collated this data. Take us through it.
That's right. In fact, Tanvi, as you were mentioning, that the information is just trickling in from J&K. What have been the main sources of information besides our reporters, who we have only managed to get access to very sparingly today? In fact, first thing is that there has been a statement issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, who specifically pointed out that there are essential services which are being maintained in the Kashmir Valley. The ministry actually talked about the fact that at least 13,500 patients are being attended to in the valley, and availability of all drugs and life-saving medical facilities are being ensured to people across the valley. They also talked about vehicular movement on the highways, saying that the national highway continues to function normally, and at least 100 heavy vehicles carrying LPG and other essentials have been plying on the national highway, and flights at the airports in the valley are operational. So in terms of transportation and movement and medical facilities, that was an update given by the MHA. We saw the Principal Secretary of Jammu and Kashmir just come out and give a daily briefing to the media a short while back. There again, he said no untoward incident has in fact been reported over the past 24 hours. He also went on to say that there are reasonable restrictions which have been imposed, that as part of the administration, that they are sensitive that the people are facing some sort of a little bit of inconvenience. But he also went on to say that these restrictions are being put in place in order to ensure minimum damage, minimum inconvenience to the people, and that local authorities are taking steps to maintain public order. But yes, as far as our reporters are concerned, it is extremely difficult. It has been difficult over the past few days to maintain communication with them, as we have seen leading up to Eid. Over the first couple of days after Article 370 rather was revoked from the valley, there was some communication. Closer to Eid, we saw that security was in fact tightened in the valley, and even now ahead of Independence Day, we are seeing similarly communication lines are still down. We have managed to get some reports from our correspondents who are there in the valley and who are, as you were mentioning, telling us stories about how people over there are actually preparing for Independence Day functions. They are getting ready for some ceremonies, functions which will be performed in Srinagar, especially in the Kashmir Stadium. But nonetheless, what we are seeing is that a strong vigil is being maintained by the local administration over there as well as the center in order to make sure that law and order situation is controlled to some extent, and that there's no untoward situation in the run-up to Independence Day.
All right, Tanima, thanks so much for summarizing, those facts for us. In fact, like Tanima was mentioning, the Ministry of Home Affairs issued a statement and said that the connectivity will be restored in both Jammu and Kashmir in phases. The centre has also said that flight services have resumed, hospitals are functioning. And like Tanima was pointing out, the Jammu and Kashmir Principal Secretary has now been briefing the media twice in a day about the situation there. He says prohibitory conditions have been relaxed in various parts of Jammu and that Valley is now gearing up for Independence Day celebrations.
We are all set to celebrate 15th of August in a grand and befitting manner, and all arrangements have been finalized for the same. There have been no reports of any significant untoward incident in the past 24 hours. Local authorities are continuously watching, reviewing the situation and taking appropriate decisions as to relaxation of restrictions. And relaxation in restrictions and prohibitory orders are indeed being given in most places.
Army Chief General Bipin Rawat has said that the army wants to normalize the situation in the valley. General Bipin Rawat said that he wanted the situation in the valley to return to what it was in the 80s before terrorism made its way.
हम जनता के साथ रहेंगे, पहले भी रहते थे, बल्कि हमारा जो मेल मिलाप जनता के साथ 70 और 80 के दशक में था, वो आप वहाँ पे जानकारी से जाइए, वहाँ पता करिए किस तरह का हमारा मेल मिलाप था वहाँ के आवाम के साथ। हम उस समय भी वहाँ पे तैनात थे, बड़े अच्छी तरह से हमारी आवाम के साथ मेल मिलाप हमारा रहता था, और उस तरह का मेल मिलाप दोबारा अगर होना शुरू हो गया तो बहुत अच्छा रहेगा। उस समय हम बगैर बंदूक के मिलते थे, अगर हम दोबारा बगैर बंदूक के मिल सकते हैं, अगर सब चीज़ वहाँ सही तरीके से रहा तो हम यही चाहते हैं।
Well, the situation continues to remain grim in the valley. As we were telling you, Independence Day preparations are underway at Srinagar Sher-e-Kashmir Stadium for functions related to that. Times Network Siddhant Mishra sent us this report from the stadium.
15th August preparations are going on at Sher-e-Kashmir Stadium in Srinagar, and right now I am with a group of performers, those who are going to perform on 15th of August. You can see, ma'am, इस बार बहुत बड़ा एक बदलाव हुआ है, 370 हटा दी गई, 370 have been scrapped. How do you see this change, and this 15th August is going to be very significant?
सर, सबसे पहले तो मैं आपके चैनल के थ्रू सभी भारतवासियों को हैप्पी इंडिपेंडेंस डे बोलना चाहूँगी, और सेकंड थिंग ये है कि हम यहाँ पे आके बहुत खुश हैं। शेर-ए-कश्मीर स्टेडियम में आके हम परफॉर्म, मतलब मैं अपने ग्रुप को लेके आई हूँ, और यहाँ पे लद्दाखी, कश्मीरी एंड डोगरा जो हमारा कल्चर है JNK का, उसको हम रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं।
सर, आप बताइए, हाउ आर यू फीलिंग टुडे?
सर, पहले तो बहुत प्राउड मूवमेंट है हम सबके लिए, हम परफॉर्म कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे 15 अगस्त के लिए। उसके बाद हम लोग बहुत दिनों से रिहर्सल कर रहे हैं जम्मू में, उसके बाद हम लोग यहाँ पे भी 2-3 दिन से रिहर्सल कर रहे हैं, तो अच्छा लगता है अपने कल्चर को प्रमोट करना, एज वेल एज जम्मू एज वेल एज अदर स्टेट्स, तो अच्छा लगता है, वी फील बेटर।
ओके, सो आई हैव विद मी अ कश्मीरी गर्ल अगेन। मैम, आप बताइए, हाउ आर यू फीलिंग टुडे? यू आर गोइंग टू परफॉर्म, 370 हैज बीन स्क्रैप्ड, इट्स अ न्यू जर्नी फॉर जम्मू एंड कश्मीर।
या सर, लेकिन बहुत अच्छा मूवमेंट है कि हम यहाँ पर आए 35A आर्टिकल हटने के बाद।
ये वाकई में मोदी जी को इसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, क्योंकि हम लोग भी जम्मू कश्मीर से बाहर से हैं, मैं पटना से हूँ, और ये बहुत ही ज़्यादा खुशी की बात है, क्योंकि ये कल्चर जो ये काफ़ी रिच कल्चर है, और जब हम लोग बाहर से इन चीज़ों से इंटरेक्ट करते हैं तो हमें भी बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिलता है।
So as you can see, you know, the preparation rehearsals are going on for 15th August here at Sher-e-Kashmir Stadium. The rehearsals are going on, and these are the groups which are going to perform. They are very excited, very enthusiastic, because 370 has been scrapped and Jammu and Kashmir has started a new journey. From 15th of this August, it's going to be a very significant Independence Day. On the right of me, I'll ask my video journalist Yogesh to pan and show you the paramilitary forces, Jammu and Kashmir police, those who have fought battles with the militancy from last more than 30 years, you know, are preparing for the 15th August parade here at Sher-e-Kashmir Stadium. You can see all the forces, those who guard, those who are on the grounds in Kashmir to maintain peace and harmony in Kashmir, are there preparing for the parade. this report we are getting you from the Kashmir Stadium, and the rehearsals are going on, preparations are going on, and we've also been told the report suggests that Home Minister Amit Shah is likely to visit Srinagar and unfurl the national flag.
But not just in Srinagar, in fact, the national flag will be unfolded and hoisted in all of the districts of Jammu and Kashmir, and preparations are underway for that. While there is no timeline that the government has given either to us or to the Supreme Court on when the restrictions will be lifted, the government, we understand, obviously will be closely monitoring the situation, and only after 15th August perhaps will we see some amount of relief maybe coming in for the people of Kashmir. Clampdown and the communication blackout continues for the 9th straight day for the valley. We move on to the second big story that we've got for you. Centre's demand to re-verify the National Register of Citizens has been rejected by the top court. Supreme Court has said that the National Registry of Citizens will not be reopened and has completely ruled out sample re-verification. Apart from this, the top court today also asked that NRC data needs to be protected to ensure that it doesn't get leaked and that it must be kept as secure as the Aadhaar data. NRC inclusion will only be published on August 31st. So no extension of the deadline has been given. The Supreme Court has said enough is enough. Let's now get over with this. Let's meet the deadline that has been said. No more extensions. Tonight, we want to understand what does this really mean. The last we knew, over 40 lakh names had been excluded from this list. Even as we speak, there is verification and re-verification of documents taking place. So that database is constantly being updated. What does it mean for those who've been left out? What does it mean for those who may not be citizens but have already been included in this list? And what does it mean for rest of India if the government follows up on its announcement of taking NRC national? Let's say good evening to Geeta Luthra, senior advocate with the Supreme Court, Aishwarya Bhati, also a senior advocate with the Supreme Court, and we've got Kailash Vastev, senior advocate with the Supreme Court. So a legal panel here to make us understand the way forward. Let me start with you, Aishwarya Bhati. Obviously, what the centre was seeking for was more time, because there is a belief that there are many who've made it to this list who don't deserve to be there, who've somehow given documentation or gotten their name, but are not actually citizens of this country. What happens now? They get the citizenship because the Supreme Court has refused to extend the deadline.
Well, Tanvi, essentially the prayer was for allowing sample re-verification specifically in border areas by the government, and yes, this request has not been allowed by the Supreme Court. So this means that the process that has gone on will have to, that will be the final list. But Tanvi, there's one thing that we need to understand, that the legal process starts from there. So if there are any wrong inclusions, that will be subject to judicial review, and if there are any wrong exclusions, even that will be subject to judicial review. It's not like, this is an executive exercise, an administrative exercise, which is obviously, of course, happening in the supervision of the Supreme Court. This is happening pursuant to a judgment of the Supreme Court, and it's being monitored regularly by Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court has itself clarified that the legal process will be available for wrongful inclusions and exclusions both.
Okay, so let's start about the legal recourse that people have. It's Mr. Kailash Vastev, what happens next once this data is published on August 30th? Can everybody who's on it or not on it approach the tribunal?
Yes, because the list has been prepared, or the NCR has been proceeded with under the directions of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will naturally follow the principles of natural justice. If there are objections, they will be entertained. If there are objections, inclusion or exclusion, both will be looked into by the tribunal, because there is a supervisory mechanism in this whole thing. That supervisory mechanism does not deprive you of your right to make a representation on either issue, wrongful inclusion or wrongful exclusion. So that right is available to anybody whose name is on the list on a doubtful area. You cannot keep that out, and I don't think the Supreme Court intends to keep that out, because a lot of people will get affected both ways. 14 lakh people is already mentioned. So out of 14 lakh, the verification will once again have to be looked into by the government, the tribunal, of course, to look into the matter.
Okay, so, but there are some issues that come to my mind. For example, Geeta Luthra, there were reports that, emerged during the floods that many people were more concerned about ensuring that they get their basic identification before they get onto the boat to be rescued and to be taken to a safer location. So obviously, year after year, when we see such kind of natural disasters and, nature's fury unleashing itself, there is a possibility that people end up losing all the records or data, paperwork that they have. What happens then? How do they ensure that they don't get booted out of this country because they don't have a paperwork done?
So I think it's going to be a very long and tedious process. And in the list, I think, which came out in August of last year, about 40 lakh people were excluded. Now the final list is to come out. And in fact, one of the aspects which was being said by the coordinator was that there was a leakage which had happened. And that's why the Supreme Court has said that the final list will come online only once, and that's on 31st August. And thereafter, only the districts will be given the various lists by hard copies. Now, frankly, there will be many people who may not be able to see the list online. There would be many people who would be excluded, who some would be entitled because if they have cases pending, their parents have cases pending, there's a possibility that the parents clear those cases and then they will come in the actual list. Now, how do you ensure that illiterate people have data? That's the big question. And I remember when we did one matter of the Punjab migrants also, there were people who actually came with virtually no information, no data. There were people who may have an odd case made against them, who had gone and taken a ticket to some place, who had actually no data. Now, that's the reason why people are going away from a natural disaster. They're saying, let me have my identity. So this identity issue for illiterate people or people who migrated years ago is a huge issue. Now, when you call it a day, so this is 3rd December, I think 2004. But the exercise, if it's taken 15 years to make an exercise and then to reverse it, is indeed a big issue, which the courts will have to look at. Now, I'm saying cases of inclusion. Who's going to object to a case of inclusion? There are bound to be people who will come forth and say, I have been wrongly excluded. And therefore, they'll try and bring data, they'll bring affidavits of neighbors, whatever information or data that they can muster. But what about those who've been wrongly included? If they've been wrongly included, how do you get them out? Who'll get them out? Which is perhaps, I mean, there are arguments for both sides.
Right.
The center and the state were saying, let's do a sample 20%. But the court has rightly said there has to be a deadline, there has to be an end to it, because then the process will again start of people making objections.
So that's a fair point. Aishwarya Bhati, is there a legal recourse for those who may have been wrongly included? I do know that as per the information given to the court, that about 1 lakh names in the last 1 year have been removed from the list after re-verification. What if there are more, especially like you said in the bordering districts with Bangladesh?
Well, Tanvi, the recourse is available to both wrongful inclusions as well as wrongful exclusions. Geeta ma'am is right in saying that there will be less people who would be obviously forthcoming, but these would essentially be cases of on complaints of somebody else, cognizance is taken, or on scrutiny of documents. For some other reason, it is found out that their documents are found to be forged. Because if somebody is acted on fraudulent or forged documents, then that legal recourse would be available to them. Now, what is more important for us to understand is that this is a process which is an executive process, yes, by judgment of the Supreme Court, but it is an executive process. We also need to bear in mind that NRC was an exercise which was supposed to happen every decade. It started off in, when we became independent as a republic, democratic country. It started off, it went on in the first decade, but it sort of just put, it just ended there abruptly. It's not, we haven't, kept up this exercise in the last 70 years. And I think it is important, what we do with people who are not legitimate citizens of the country is something that can be spoken about, or decided by, depending on the, the resources that are available in the country, the resources in that particular state, the kind of demographic changes that are happening. But it is very important to ascertain who are the rightful citizens and who are not. Now, interestingly, we also have to bear in mind that our constitution protects the fundamental rights for two classes. One is the citizens, who have all the fundamental rights which are available to them, and the constitutional also protects people who are non-citizens, who are in India. So that is a different kind of protection. For example, 14 and 21, which are the all-important, fundamental rights available in our constitution, is available to both citizens and non-citizens. But it is important to go through this exercise and understand and ascertain who are the rightful citizens of the country.
Fair enough, but again, I will come back to that question. How are we sure that this exercise of ascertaining is actually doing the fair job? I mean, if we have concerns and fears that illegal immigrants have made it to the list, then shouldn't we be concerned about legitimate people not making it to the list?
Yeah, absolutely, you're right, Tanvi. These would be very, very important concerns.
See, please understand.
That is why the legal recourse is available. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Aishwarya Bhati, then I'll go to Kailash Vasudev and Geeta Luthra.
Yeah, so I was just saying that you're right. These are extremely valid and legitimate issues because, whoever is declared as a non-citizen, it's taking away a whole lot of constitutional rights and remedies which are available. So that is why the legal recourse starts from there. This is an executive exercise, and after this, the legal process starts.
Okay. Mr. Kailash Vasudev, you wanted to come in?
See, I wanted to come in because you can always find inclusions which are wrong.
Yeah.
Document verification will lead to a conclusion whether the documents are bona fide or no. If documents are not bona fide, the government is entitled to seek the exclusion of the person from the list. At this point of time, a large number of records have been found to be incomplete. Those incomplete records are the areas which are causing difficulties in this, and therefore an extension of time was sought. But on the other side, you cannot turn around and say that exclusion will not take place. Exclusions will come, they will come on objections, they will come on further verifications. This verification process has actually started in the last 3 years after the Supreme Court judgment. Before that, nothing was happening. And if nothing was happening, it is the Supreme Court. I mean, one has to respect the decision of the court to protect the rights of the local people of Assam and the neighboring states. You cannot permit their rights to be trammeled by persons who have come in without there being any right to stay here. Merely staying in India does not give you citizenship right if your actions have not been bona fide. You've come in as refugees, your refugee status is different, your citizenship status is different. You cannot put the two together. There are two different areas, two different classes of people in their entirety. And if they're in a different class, they have to be treated differently, and they must. I mean, at some point of time, we have to accept the fact that we have been very lax in our policies in permitting persons to come and settle here when they had no rights. The 1971 war permitted a huge influx of people. They should have gone back technically, but no steps were taken. And it is here that conflict has started between the locals and non-locals, depriving the local people of their rights.
Right.
Constitutionally, the citizen has a right. The refugee has a right of protection only under 21. So if he has only a right of protection, the protection emanates till such time as he is here and is not deported. He does not have a right in the full form as a citizen has, because the Constitution extends to citizens. It does not extend to refugees in the same form.
No,
So
but my question,
exclusion
Mr.
will
Vasudev,
take
and I'm
place
sorry
and
I'm
must take
interrupting
place.
here, but I
Verification
understand what
has-
you're saying, and that's the larger debate of
No,
whether
please.
as a policy this country, what rights we give to the refugees and to the illegal immigrants, or what do we do with them. But my concern right now is to say legitimate citizens who are unable to prove their citizenship. And floods is a reality in Assam, so are other, there can be so many other reasons that you failed, you've probably traveled, you probably got stuck with some corrupt officials who were doing your verification or re-verification process. There are so many reasons where it can go wrong. Even as we sit, I'm reading reports that say that in many parts there is right now a big concern because officials seem to be rushing through the re-verification process to meet the deadline. And people are being sent notices to asking them to explain their documentation within the next few days. What if they are traveling? What if they're not reachable? My concern is legitimate citizens being left out of the list.
You see, legitimate citizens always have a right to secure documents as secondary evidence. You may have your voter's ID card, you may have your driving licenses, you will have all sorts of documents to support your status. If you lose them, you can always procure copies. The system hasn't collapsed because of a flood. Areas have collapsed. The system continues. You can always obtain copies of your documents which are legitimate. Okay. You can obtain copies of your Aadhaar card. You can obtain copies of your driving license. You can obtain copies of your ration cards. You can obtain copies of your voter ID card. So this is a system which goes on. You have a right to get copies. You may, and please tell me one thing. This process started 3 years ago. The floods are now barely a month old or a month and a half. What stopped you from applying at that point of time? So you see, there are areas which the Supreme Court has fixed a cutoff date because it's been monitoring this for several years now. And if it has been a procedure which has been set by the court, a date has been fixed, well, we're all obliged to carry it out.
Okay, no.
It is here that the tribunal may come in to protect those who have been wrongly excluded or wrongly included.
All right, point taken. Obviously, floods is a regular annual affair in Assam.
Wrongly excluded,
many of them spend months together, year after year, living in relief camps, and then go back to destroyed homes. That was my limited point. But Geeta Luthra, you wanted to come in on this aspect as well?
Mm-hmm. So basically what I want to say is I don't agree totally with Mr. Vasudev. He's taking this from the viewpoint of a person who's educated, who has the means at his disposal to be able to get secondary evidence. Now, if you're talking about somebody who is virtually a semi-homeless person, who is working as a farmhand, who is working in a rented accommodation where nobody gives him a tenancy receipt, or he's living in a shanty, then those are the people that would not have evidence. And I mean, as reports come, the government itself, the center itself has said, we feel that there are, and let's do a 20% re-verification. So therefore, there are some genuine apprehensions that there could, I'm not faulting the court, because somewhere there has to be a line, there has to be a time limit, there has to be a deadline. But, and I'm not even concerned about those who are wrongly included. Even though they say many people from the bordering villages of Bangladesh have been wrongly included. So be it, they're wrongly included. What of those who are wrongly excluded? That's the worry. Those who don't have proof that both their parents are from India after the cutoff date of 3rd December 94, or who can't have one parent, after the 1987 cutoff date. It's those people who don't have evidence, or whose evidence may have been destroyed, or who never had evidence because of the kind of means at their disposal, or the kinds of lives that they live, is, after all, to err is human. And we are having men who are manning this verification process.
Correct.
There's bound to be faults. There's bound to be mistakes. That's the only fear. Nobody is faulting the fact and the Supreme Court judgment.
Yes. Well, from what I can understand, that the legal recourse is still available and that process will go on. We'll wait and watch the data that emerges on August 31st. One can only hope the data isn't leaked further before that, because that is also leading to many instances and reports of people being harassed on ground. And that should not be acceptable. Until the data is sealed, the register is done, the government and the court together decide what the next course of action is. We must ensure that the data, the National Register for Citizens, is protected. I'm going to thank our three esteemed panelists for joining us and explaining this to us in very clear terms of what it really means for people of this country. Of course, this is an exercise which has taken decades to be carried out only for Assam. The current government hopes to extend and plans to extend this to the entire country. Will that be possible? Remains to be seen. That's the second big story. Let's move on to the third big story on Urban Debate. And here's yet another instance of VVIP culture in our country that has become such a menace. This also exists at places of worship. Here is an example. In Tamil Nadu's Kanchipuram, district collector was seen threatening a policeman. This district collector alleged that the policeman had let people without passes enter the temple, and he got upset because the VVIP darshan had been disrupted. The collector threatened to call the commissioner and the DIG to suspend the cop. Obviously, once this video emerged and went viral, the district collector apologized for his behavior. But this is an instance that goes on to show you the mindset that exists in this country. How dare you allow common people to enter and disrupt the VVIP darshan? VIP darshans is a reality across many places of worship in our country. Why should that be allowed? Let's ask our panelists, Dinakar Lanka, leader of the BJP, Sudha Ramalingam, senior advocate with the Madras High Court, and Rahul Ishwar, a social activist. And before I go across to Rahul, in fact, let me begin by asking Mr. Lanka, who's now with the BJP. Mr. Lanka, what is your view? Should netas and babus or other celebrities get this VVIP treatment?
Yes, absolutely. VVIP culture and enjoying the protocols in a inhuman way by the political leaders and the bureaucrats across the nation, irrespective of the parties and the states, since independence, which is creating a lot of inconvenience and obstacles to the common man on the roads and the streets. That's why Modi ji has given a call to remove the VVIP culture and provide maximum governance to serve the people without interruption in their day-to-day life. But unfortunately, the things which are coming into the light are very serious one. Today, what happened in the Kanchipuram, the collector, so-called collector, he told that out of emotional burst, he made all these things. But if he has a human being having an emotion, such a old-aged couple should get served first. But the way in which the psychological attitude of the officers who wants to serve their hierarchy or politicians to get their blessings, that is the thing which is happening not only in Tamil Nadu. Let you see in Andhra Pradesh, Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam, Thousands of the pilgrims comes every day to Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam. Previously, there are VVIP passes in L1 and L2. Now the present government of YSRCP told that L1, L2, everything is cancelled. But how the VVIP system is continuing when cancelled those passes?
Yes.
So these are the words. They are saying one thing, they are doing another thing, creating a lot of inconvenience to the common people, especially old-aged people and the physically challenged people are there. They have to look into in a human angle. But this is most unfortunate. It is not at all acceptable. As Modi ji told that VVIP system and protocol system should be examined, and each and every state at state level, irrespective of the party, the Modi ji call should be followed strictly.
Okay. In fact, what you are mentioning, and let me just also explain this to our viewers, the example that you gave of Tirupati, they have an L1 list category, which is for VVIP officials like judges, higher cadre officials from the government organization and sitting ministers. Then they have an L2 category, which is for the temple board employees, their family members, and the lower level of government employees and officials. Then they have an L3 layer of VVIP access, which is through recommendation letters obtained from sitting MPs, legislators, higher cadre officials, and TDT employees. And then comes the common man. Now, they are saying that they will do away with this entire system and come out with a new system. The new system can also be based on the money. There are many places, Rahul Ishwar, where you can get a pass, quick access pass, if you pay for it. My question is, should that be allowed as well? Why should a rich person get an easier access to God than a poor person?
Especially on principle, I think we should all agree that there should not be any discrimination, differentiation in the house of a god or a temple or any spiritual place for that matter. I have been part of many temples, and on the other side, many people would say there are practical difficulties. The major issue is many people misuse these kind of VVIP queues, L1, L2 queues, or different category queues. I think for a broader sake, there should be more transparency, and there should not be any kind of a VVIP racist kind of an attitude when we at least come to shrines. When you go to temples or mosques or church, see, we are going for peace, we are going for what we believe is our Lord. So some kind of equanimity, some kind of level playing field should be there. And it's a hard reality. Since I have been part of many institutions such like this, I have been I personally know, yes, there has been a very discriminatory practice, money given practice, recommendation oriented practice. I think devotees themselves, beyond petty benefits that they get from these, should come forward and discourage such kind of practice, because it can't be simply eliminated overnight, because somebody will always be powerful, somebody will call from CM's office, somebody will call from a chief secretary's office. There will always be preferences, but on a broader scale, these should be discouraged. At least in a temple, there should be some kind of a peaceful prayer space where there is no discrimination and there is no VVIP racism.
That's a fair point. You say that, you'll always get a call from CM's office. You can get a call from any high-profile VVIP's office or a letter, and then, the temple authorities are forced to give that privilege to the Ramalingam. Then how do we stop this? If we leave it to the people, it will probably not change by itself, because everybody wants that special treatment.
Yeah, you're right. If only we have actually proper access, easy access to everyone, nobody is going to jump the queue. The whole problem is when there are special accesses, you try to make use of the special access. That's what is happening now. Maintaining a status quo is more convenient for people at higher places, and they want to actually show off that they can do it, and they try to do it. So, in fact, what is really essential is that there is real equal, easy access to everyone, which is kept in a very transparent fashion. But that is not so. What has happened as far as this particular incident is concerned is, it was very painful to see that the collector takes the side of the VIPs and also bashes up a policeman. The policeman was at the end of the entire structure, and he is actually overworked, underpaid, and he is there the whole day, bearing the brunt of both the VIPs and the commoners there. So I don't think it was right on the part of the collector to have shouted at the particular officer, and he was not actually an officer of a higher grade. He was only, I think, of a sub-inspector rank. This is something which we continuously see. Policemen in the ranks are being bashed up. The higher officers may escape the wrath of the people, but these men are now being bashed up by both the commoners as well as the higher officers. There should be some system evolved where they are not actually being taken to task for no fault of theirs.
Yes, absolutely. So, but you know, where does the change then begin, Dinakar Lanka? I know you say, and I know Prime Minister has said that we must stop all kinds of VVIP racism, but it's not happening. Imagine the plight of that cop, and you can see it in the visuals. He's extremely scared. And this district collector is just going on and on and on. Now, in many cases, this one got caught on camera. So the babu was forced to apologize. But in many cases, you know, these policemen also end up getting suspended. Anybody who's on duty at the temple and questions a VVIP can get punished for it.
Yeah.
Here in this episode, very clearly, the police officer allowed old-aged couple. They haven't VVIP process with them. They have allowed under humanitarian ground. Collector should upheld, and he should give some applause to the police personnel. Being a practical way, he thought about the old-aged couple. Instead of that, he threatened, the collector threatened the police officer, and he compared the people who are around the temple as a mud. The way in which the collector is thinking about the people, when the VVIPs like IAS officers, IPS officers, ministers, and so many so-called VVIPs, whoever they are coming, when these people who are scattered around the temple to get darshan of the deity, they are termed as a mud. It is quite unfortunate. On the one hand, we are discussing about the VVIP racism. How can we remove it? How can we should get regularized, and how we can terminate these kind of systems we are discussing. But the human angle, how psychologically they are thinking about the people, that is very important. They are public servants.
Yes, they're not. They're only busy. They're busy organizing
people as a mud. It is not at all fair.
Temple visits for VVIPs and ensuring that there is no hiccup when a VVIP lands, that there is no queue, there is no crowd, there is no chaos, that all of that goes smooth. They're not bothered about the people. They're bothered about their bosses and the higher ups. But Rahul, the other aspect that I touched upon, what's your view on that? These paid for passes for special aartis and for special separate entrances. Why should that exist?
Tanviji, let me be very honest. See, we are all against VVIP racism, but there is a practicality angle there too. In one of our temples, there was a serious debate in Kerala when the High Court itself intervened and said VVIP queue shouldn't be there. But then again, a problem comes. When a central minister comes, there is an issue of security. When a High Court justice or a Supreme Court justice comes, there is an issue of security. That's the space where we should strike a fine balance. And this is an issue of temples, not only in India. There are some places worldwide too. When I know I was in Malaysia, such in a temple, such a thing happened. So we announced something very interesting. We said God doesn't like, or the deity doesn't like people who jump the queue. Please maintain the discipline. See, people are super sensitive. The density of people coming on a particular day will be very high. The festivities will bring in a lot of people. So yes, there is an angle of discipline. We should spiritually make them appeal. The priest or the guru of that particular shrine or mud or temple should make definite appeals.
Paid passes. You didn't answer my question about paid passes.
Yeah, see, I'm being very honest with this, because nobody in principle agrees to any of this. But at the same point of time, as a matter of reality, this happens. Unless we need some kind of a court intervention where it categorically discourages, that's the reason I pointed out. Paid passes is there, influence passes through special influences is there, special, privileges are there. See, this is the issue. One security angle aspect is also there. We all on principle, I believe, no devotee will demand any special treatment in front of their own God. We all would like to feel humble in front of God. But there are many people who misuse this. There should be some kind of a system that should evolve, that this kind of VVIP racism shouldn't be there.
Absolutely. And I think it's a pity and it's a shame that people use their positions of power or contacts with positions of power to get special treatment in the house of God, to get special treatment when they're going to pray, to offer prayers. It's shameful that they would use these privileges. That doesn't really show any kind of dedication to your faith. Unfortunately, like Rahul Ishwar was pointing out, the system will continue unless perhaps the judiciary steps in. While security may be a legitimate reason, but that should only be for those who are high security level and high, SPG protectees maybe. For everybody else, for a local leader, for a local minister, for a local celebrity, why should, or for any rich person, why should there exist a facility to go and separately enter the shrine or any place of worship when the other devotees are not able to do so? Think about it. How will we end this VVIP culture is the big question. And to the fourth big story, this is an international one. Violent protests have intensified across Hong Kong against a controversial extradition bill that the Hong Kong government wants to introduce. The extradition bill gives power to the government to allow criminal extradition of an individual to mainland China, and that courts also will not be allowed to inquire in the quality of justice of this process. Today, the Hong Kong airport authorities cancelled all departing flights, and this was done for the second straight day in a row. This is the second day of protests that are being held at the airport by pro-democracy protesters. India itself issued an advisory asking travelers to get in touch with their respective airlines to know about possible delays in their operations. Indian passengers stranded in Hong Kong have been advised to find alternate travel routes to avoid any kind of inconvenience. Timothy McLoin, contributing reporter to the Washington Post, is joining us live from Hong Kong. Timothy, thanks for speaking to us. What can you tell us about, the protest today and the situation in Hong Kong?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I can tell you in the last few minutes here, as I've been waiting to come on air, things have escalated dramatically. Riot police have arrived at the airport in Hong Kong. There was a huge crowd there. Protesters are attacking the police vans. So an extremely chaotic scene that's unfolding very quickly right now, and has gotten much more violent and much more chaotic in the last 5 to 10, 15 minutes.
In the first round of protests, Timothy, we saw they were mostly peaceful, based in the central district. How is it that the attention has now turned towards the airport?
The aim and the objective of the protesters when they started heading to the airport was to bring their message and to spread the message to international travelers. Hong Kong has long marketed itself as an international city, Asia's international city, kind of a international hub and gateway. So they were trying to seize on this marketing by the government and kind of flip that and do a little bit of PR themselves and bring their message out to people who are traveling through Hong Kong Airport internationally.
But since the operations were suspended, are there any reports? Do we know if there are any people, stranded inside the airport right now?
Yeah, so certainly there's been widespread disruptions today and yesterday. Some protesters, some travelers have been saying that they are getting a bit frustrated with the situation. Some have been stuck there for many hours, as you can imagine at this point. Wondering when they'll get out. As modern airports and airlines work, getting things up and running is not super fast. There's obviously a knock-on effect here where flights get canceled and they need new crews. So logistically, quite difficult to get things up and running, and I think that's only going to be more difficult come tomorrow, given the scenes of what we're seeing tonight.
All right, Timothy McLaurin, thank you so much for joining us and bringing us that update from Hong Kong. And as Timothy was pointing out, situation is actually getting worse right now, even as we speak, with the protests intensifying outside the Hong Kong airport. The protests against this controversial bill have now gone on for almost 6 weeks. The deadlock continues. We'll keep a close tab on what's happening in Hong Kong on this controversial bill and the protests. But for now, we are completely out of time on this edition of The Urban Debate. Thank you so much for joining us.